Hey everybody, this is Brad Doug reaching out to you. Now I've done two fairly extensive videos, one about how to buy warranty stuff and it's never been used ever and it's like buying brand new gear. The second thing is I talk to basic infrastructure things and how do you want your inbound outbound setup to look like in a classical home lab setup. Then also talk to the capacitance of how to optimize your home routers and so on so you get the maximum return. And so this video is going to be about talking to IT operations and engaging the beginning of CI CD as a process. Now, for those operations people out there, let me explain what I mean. The process of taking your operations that supports your IT, specifically your production environments that service your customer base like CRMs and so on, is a continuous process that requires that you do patching and updates and add features and so on. And that's been usually referred to as software configuration management, and other variations of it over the years, following the CapEx, and that's capital expense, versus OpEx, which is operations expense, variable. Now, that's not the case today when you're working with cloud providers, and we are moving to more of a service provider strategy, but that requires that we introduce continuous integration, continuous development strategies, or CI CD. And for managers and directors and so on, the hard stuff about this, especially related to service reliability engineering goals, so that you stay 24/7, 365 days a year, and so on and so on and so on, is how do you gauge that? What's your grading scale? Well, it isn't like flipping on a switch. And don't make the mistake of listening to the hype about CI CD tools like orchestration tools and so on, that they're the all in and can do tool that will make everything work integration wise. And that is not correct. It's a ploy, it's a trick. Kind of goes back to the days when the word enterprise meant fixes everything kind of thing. Just like we're experiencing today with the word AI. AI can do everything. It's a rinse and repeat buzzword analogy that you should really be careful about when you go forward. The real markers that help you understand the nature of beginning to introduce your DevOps by integrating CI CD processes is to first make sure you understand what you have at the beginning. The second part is make sure that you know how to administrate it at least at 80% capacity. Now, what do I mean by that part? I mean, you might have jumped on a service provider and they give you these really cool little tools and you've been using them indirectly. You set them up and you walked away, and they've been running ever since. But the mistake is you never went back. You never went back and checked. You never understood, what is this service doing? Is it optimized? Is it operationally in place? Are my alerts in place? Are they going to alert me when certain thresholds are crossed, and so on and so on? And usually the answer is no, because we're in such a hurry to meet our executive leadership's goals that we sacrifice our skill set. So the end result is you're not prepared. So knowing your process and knowing how to be a solid administrator of your process are critical. The next step is the documentation process. If these three things don't exist, you cannot get a pulse on your progression of your CI CD tools. And are they getting where you need them to be? Because in a nutshell, the truth is there is no standard. Your company is completely unique. Every company is completely unique that I've seen with DevOps, and they're setting their own new standards. So understand that reality, and then you're going to be a lot more capable of setting your expectations once you've got the three core functions done. Now, once you're there and you've got these three components working, you know what you're using, you know how to administrate what you're using, and you've documented the process. That documentation process is CI right there. That's continuous integration. We can automate that process. We can strip it away from the manual and make it automated in its process. Yes, you can ingest AI tools to make your scripting more efficient and more functional, but the limitations of AI is right about there. It's not going to come in and reinvent a wheel. Understand AI is very limited in its scope and capacity. Anyone who knows services would understand that immediately in that case. But there is a value that can help with JSON scripting, PHP, or other kind of service languages that could be optimized in that process in support of working with platform services, Terraform, GitHub, GitLab, and so on and so on and so on. So the end game is you're going to be able to start looking at your core tools. This is where you set your first metrics. You have the core tools which have exactly the same requirements as your services. So, yep, you rinse and repeat. You know what your CI CD tool can do. Let's say, for instance, it's GitLab or GitHub or Terraform or Ansible. You have to know how to use it, right? So, and you've got it in use. Then you've got to be able to administrate it so it's optimizable in a capacity that you understand. In other words, you know what the tool you're using and how to use it effectively. Then at that point stage, there's a documentation process, a standard operating procedure, which you've got to formulate that will allow the automation to start to work. Just because we automate things does not mean we still don't have the overhead of doing that. And if you don't plan for that, your expectations are off. It takes hard work and time to get these to work, and as we bring more of the CI CD tools into play to better integrate with each other, then and only then can we say, okay, I need an orchestrator next. And that orchestration tool or tools, it could be more than one tool, will come down, and you have to, unfortunately, repeat that same procedure again. My whole point is a realization that the old overhead still exists with the new idea of DevOps and CI CD, but the return of CI CD versus the old days of software configuration management are greater. We're seeing a much better return between the two, and that's why I endorse IT operations, your SRE integration functionalities, to completely sweep into that role so that more automation can happen and less of the manual processes, because the other ticker that you need to have for your metrics is over here on the side of your points of failure rates. Points of failure rates means your single point of failures, that guy or that girl who knows everything and no one else does, and when they go on vacation and it happens, it breaks, they're not available, that's a point of failure. You have other types of points of failure, such as, I don't know how to administrate this because I haven't had a chance to take the time to take the training to be a good administrator on that particular service, such as SNS or pre-checks or backup tools and so on. Those metrics are important, and you should track them while you're evolving your new way of doing IT operations, utilizing the disciplines of DevOps and CI CD and other components. This will make that metrics of failure rates shrink. The other metrics that I recommend that you bring into the equation is proactive response. Let me make it really clear. Your monitoring response times are super critical with CI CD. You can stage scripts using CI CD processes that are scripted to execute when a monitor hits a certain value and it says execute this post action. You'll go over and make an action item and rescale the resources and auto scale out that issue so it goes away. But more importantly, your trending analysis is showing that you can jump ahead of it before it becomes a train wreck. And you can divert the tracks, and this helps you get better at that. That was one of the biggest things that when I came on board, is it was constant fire. Put them out. React. And over the past 24 months, we are much more proactive. We use trending models. We take the time and review it and say, this is kind of increasing a little sooner than expected. And by giving our own analysis in the game, we can go out and say, let's scale that up, let's scale this down, we're wasting money there, let's increase this resource here. And this is creating a much more flexible, proactive problem fixing process, opposed to dealing with an incident / outage issue. And it does add up. So how will that look? What's the datagram model? What's the power charts? What's the Gantt models? All of that. Actually, I'm sorry. You're going to have to put that part together, because I wasn't kidding you. The biggest factor about DevOps is it's 100% set to have to customize around what you use and what you call your product. I don't care if you have manufacturing environments and you need to have Internet of Things. Everybody is different. Everybody's products are different. The code is in-house. Your intellectual property dictates what your business model looks like. That's where you, as the expert in being in the directorship or the leadership role, or you're an architect role, you're going to have to build those Gantt models. You're going to have to build out those structures and give yourself an idea of what is realistic to reach these goals. What's your timeline going to look like over the goals that have been set by the executive leadership teams, and the end goal, and what should we see shrink, what should we see grow as a benefit in this regard, and these are the scales of time frames those are going to look like. And of course, you're going to do all that, plus you got to go administrate your systems, because we're all wearing multiple hats these days. I have to tell you, as personal testimony, when I came on board to help out the company I work with, it was to help them. And being in as an architect and being director and all that kind of stuff, you're thinking clerical, you're thinking managerial, you're thinking time resourcing and so on. But suddenly I had to put on my admin tier 4 hat, and I had to jump right in doing tier 4 administration work just to stabilize things and to get a grasp of it. And yeah, that's the last piece of this. DevOps is intensive. You got to know it. You got to understand it. Now, the key thing is you can't look at all of it at once. That's a kiss of death. You can't do that. You see the big picture. You identify what is running fairly okay and is more code related, and then you look at everything else. And that will eventually get to what you call infrastructure. So you look first down here at infrastructure, because that's the thing that's going to give you the resources you need to begin to stage your CI CD tools, your DevOps models, your testing beds, your environments, and all that you need, that can work their way slowly up to the code. So it is a staircase. You have to do them one or two at a time to get you up to a good place. For the enterprise level DevOps people and designers and program managers, your next question is going to be, and I'm going to answer it for you. I got 34 of these environments. I've got 124 distributed sites, and we're a 3-tier design implementation on multiple cloud providers. We're hybrid multi-cloud. How can we do this? Well, the answer to that is simple. You have to be able to do it based on the infrastructure that supports the product sample. So let's say you're a Ford Motor Company, right? And you have 124 environments. Those are products, in other words. These generate revenue for your company. Each one of these have their own infrastructure requirements to make them work as they do every single day. They can be distributed, doesn't matter. That's the good news. The bad news is that's 134 projects that require 134 PMs. The PMs don't really do much except drive the schedule. When they drive the schedule, the PMs then go down into and support the administrative level as those DevOps development resource tools go into effect, and you have to remorph your core teams. Every one of those systems, those 134 systems, they have core teams. They have to be educated to be able to transition to CI CD. And that is in its own a task. And we're not talking about a small group of resources. When I worked with BB&T, we had a strong resource of close to 100 people in an equation that was supporting 54 products. And the spectrum of that was, one or two key people for each product, and then it would scale down and start crossing over into other groups, which eventually get into the more classical operations and CapEx style operations personnel that are out there. But today that's changing a lot because companies can't afford to have 2 infrastructure admins, 2 infosec admins, 2 ops admins, 24 OA support admins, distributed through 12 sites, 2 DBAs, 2 data scientists, 2 this, 2 that, 2 this, to avoid the single point of failures, and so on, because that ends up becoming a rather big core-centric team. Unfortunately, you can compress the skill sets down where storage can be put into other things, so you can get rid of your storage administrators, and you can kind of box cap some of the infosec stuff. Network infrastructure is complicated at best, usually not easy in worst case scenarios, so that's kind of an iffy situation. You can compress your database skill sets into get rid of the scientists, just keep the DBAs, or get rid of the DBAs and just keep data specialists for databases. There are a variety of options you can do, but I'll tell you the truth. Most of the people who have to deal with this challenge don't have those people, and they know they need them, and they've got to do something, so they'll hybrid it into something, into the next whatever that's the greatest idea since sliced bread. But that's called evolution and progress. I wouldn't stress over that part as much as you understanding that if you don't prepare the time, you don't prepare the resources, and you don't allow the repetitive processes to work, you're never going to be able to gauge this effectively to a conclusion. And you end up having yet another CapEx-like disaster. I've been there, done that, and many a time I've come in behind somebody who's done that and said, let's just break this down into its basic components. That's the smart way to do this. We'll tear them down, we'll reach goal 10 for each of them, and then everything will reach goal 10, and then we can start it over again. But the automation's starting to work now. It's getting smoother, it's getting cleaner, it's getting more efficient. You can move a mountain one shovel at a time, only if you know to do it that way. This is Brad Dyke. I hope this has been an okay video for you. It's a combination of large-scale companies where you're just a cog in a fairly sophisticated machine, or you're a key cog in a small model that needs to grow, and everything that's in between. If you have any questions, please feel free to reach out to me. I'm also out on LinkedIn if you want to find me there. That can give you some more information in regards to some of the environments that I've worked in myself. I just reiterate to everyone out there, please understand the cardinal mistake that most architects, project PMs, and so on do, and that is they think that DevOps is a simple cookie cutter process you can just deploy on anything. Not even close. And you're already programmed for failure before you get anywhere. So just remember that detail. If you don't get anything else from this video, remember that one key detail. Your company's unique, it's special, treat it that way, and you're going to fit it much more effectively by doing it than trying to implement an ITIL or a Black Sigma or some type of general doctrine on it. It just doesn't work that way. Well, this is Brad Dyke signing off. God bless and have a great week, and take care, everybody. Bye-bye.